right. Well, hello, everybody. I'm trying to figure out this crazy technology, but assuming that there's some folks here listening, I'll just start right in. And I believe this is being recorded. So today I was going to talk about high sales, low cost, keeping your priorities straight. And I wanted to say a little bit more about me and who I am, because I know that people are like, naturopathic medicine? What? It's kind of a still an out of the box sort of idea here in Ohio. So just a little bit of background for orientation. I am a naturopathic doctor. So that means I went to 4 years of undergrad and 4 years of naturopathic medical school. There are currently 6 naturopathic medical schools in North America that are accredited through the U.S. Department of Education. There's a accrediting body called the Council on Naturopathic Medical Education, part of the U.S. Department of Education. And, you know, people in Ohio don't really know about us because we're mostly trained on the West Coast. I went to school in Portland, Oregon. It's the oldest naturopathic school in the country. There's not been a lot of support for this kind of holistic minded medicine, but that's essentially what I do. You can see some of these quotes kind of flying across the screen here. This is our current website. I'm going to show you our up and coming website that's hopefully going to be launched here in a few weeks. But how did I end up getting into this whole field is a little bit relevant because I came to Ohio as literally the first naturopathic doctor, I'll say, in the modern era, because there were naturopathic doctors back before there was a lot of what I'm going to call suppression of this kind of medicine in the 50s, 40s and 50s, 30s, 40s and 50s. And there weren't a lot of people coming to Ohio because nobody knows what it is. And it's a whole new way of thinking. But I grew up in Indiana, and I had had some pretty frustrating experiences with the healthcare system as a child and with my own health, as well as my mother's health. And just the short story on that was that I had chronic skin issues as a kid, was always just getting stronger and stronger prescriptions of steroids, which made no sense to me because I'm like, this isn't going to take care of the problem. It just makes it go away. And then you got to use the steroid cream again. And then when I was a freshman in high school, a pretty tragic thing happened where my mother was suddenly very ill and really just couldn't function anymore. And she went to the hospital and they put her in the psych ward and diagnosed her with schizophrenia. So long story short, several years later, we figure out she never had schizophrenia. She had a degenerative neurological condition. So this all got my wheels rotating when I was a young lass in high school, very frustrated and very angry. And I decided I was going to study anthropology, traditional cultures, medicine. And then I realized I didn't want to study the traditional cultures. I wanted to actually study the medicine and the holistic medicines. And so that kind of led me on the path of, you know, as soon as I made that decision, somebody said, oh, here's this, you know, school out in Portland, Oregon. And back in 1992, I sent $5 away to the National College of Naturopathic Medicine. $5 I mailed out, and I got a little booklet, you know, half of an 8x10 little booklet back in the mail that explained what the medical courses were. And I thought, oh my God, this is exactly everything that I want to know. I want to understand all of this. And that led me on my path without really thinking that I wanted to be a doctor. So that was like not really part of the equation until I was in my interview to be accepted. I traveled out to Portland to see the school, and they said, so how do you think it'll be seeing really sick people all day long? And won't that be depressing? And how are you going to deal with that? And I was like, hadn't really thought about that, but I was, you know, savvy, smart on my feet, and came up with some, you know, answer, and they ended up accepting me, and that's what I decided to do. So here I am 20 years later from opening my doors here in Cleveland Heights. I'm in the Heights Medical Building in Cleveland Heights above Barrio and Luna, which most case students, I assume, know. I've been there for 20 years, since January of 2000. And kind of made a go of things. So the reason I wanted to talk today about high sales and low costs and keeping your priorities straight is, when I think about entrepreneurs, I understand a lot about this because I have always been an entrepreneur myself, and just kind of figured things out on how am I going to make a go of these things. So when I think of an entrepreneur, I think of game changers. I think of people who are out of the box thinkers. I think of visionaries, people with just tons and tons and tons of ideas. But then sometimes when those entrepreneurial types go out, try to start something, they kind of get in over their heads and have too many ideas or too many different areas that they're trying to throw into this idea for a business venture without really thinking through, what is my revenue model going to be? What are my, where am I actually going to make my money? And so that really leads me to thinking about, what I did in my practice when I got started. And the way that I really went about opening my practice here in Ohio, where nobody knew what the hell a naturopathic doctor is, I had a very clear idea of who I could help, which honestly, I believe was everybody. I would walk down the street and think, yep. All of these people are potential patients. And then I was very clear about the message that I was going to deliver, the service I was going to provide, the things that really served as what I would call my unique differentiators. I think that's probably a business term that folks use. And I had a pretty clear focus on what my priorities were. So, a lot of this may not necessarily be extrapolated to your typical startup, but for me, it was about, number one, having this very unique differentiating philosophy of medicine around holism, taking into account the mind, body, the spirit. And, I know everybody's heard of this at this point, psychosomatic medicine, all these things. It gets a lot of lip service, but, you think 20 years ago, like, there weren't very many people in Cleveland talking about these things. We had a smattering of acupuncturists and, some other holistic minded folks, but there weren't a lot of people who were, bona fide professionals, educated, and doing this kind of medicine. So that was one piece. And then another aspect of it was I had a very specific way of using homeopathic medicine for acute illness, for anxiety and depression, people who had chronic infections and didn't want to be taking antibiotics anymore, or understood that the infection would just come back, and they wanted a different option. And then people with, gastrointestinal issues who are uncomfortable every time they eat or have any other, diagnosis around their gastrointestinal tract. So those were, that's really more around who I was serving. And then the other side of it is that because I am using very specific, pure, natural therapies, I really needed to provide people with what it was that they were going to be using as medicine. So that's the other half of really the core competency that we provide, is having products. So you can see here we have a shop. I'm not even wanting to show you this shop because it's not so great, and that's part of why we're redoing the whole website. But I did create this e-commerce site about 10 years ago, and it's helped us a lot save time in the office to have our patients just go and place their orders online, and then we don't have to do their invoicing and all of that. So we've always given people free shipping as a way to, encourage them to use the site. But the site really has needed a lot of work, and we're in the process of building a whole new site at this point. But we do pretty much have just about anything anybody would want. We've got a lot of issues with our pictures here. Vitamins, minerals, nutrition, and all of this has been vetted, basically products that I use because I know that they work in clinical practice. So that's definitely another component of, focus from where I began in the beginning. So the high sales, low costs was really about what am I going to do to drive revenue without putting myself out of business because I have too many expenses as an entrepreneur who really doesn't have a lot of money to get going and wants to be able to provide this service that nobody really knows anything about. So the way that I entered into all of that was to keep the number of products that I had for sale as minimal as possible, and then keep the number of services that I had for sale as minimal as possible. I mean, you don't really for sale, it's, the types of things that I'm doing consultations. There's a lot of other things that we could do in terms of services. So there's something that we do called hydrotherapy. There are other hands-on type of therapies, other treatment modalities that all could be added in. And I opted to just, go very slow and add things as we could, as we were able to afford to do that. Another part of the whole low cost was starting very small in terms of space. So my suite, I initially shared with a psychiatrist. We shared the waiting room. And then when he retired, I took over that space and was ready to do that. And when it comes to employees, I had just a part-time employee initially, and then had a full-time person, and then ultimately a full-time person and a part-time person, and then actually now I have 2 full-time people, another doctor, and even a third full-time person that's kind of possibly phasing out one of the other full-time folks. I'm going to try to figure out how to share my new website now. So this is just a sneak preview of what our new website's going to look like. A little powerful view here, but really just kind of giving the idea that we're helping folks to get to the root of their issues and be able to use natural medicines rather than what I call chemicals, pharmaceuticals. I really am helping people to try to understand that treating any kind of issue is really about supporting the body's normal functioning, and we facilitate reinstating the normal functioning. So whole complete redesign here on what we do, and have started to expand a little bit of other services. If I jump here to our services page, you can see we got a lot of different things here, each of which you can read about a little bit separately. My practice has morphed mostly into working with cancer patients, helping people understand how cancer develops and what all those parameters are around it, and so that they can change the aspects of their lifestyle and take responsibility for what they can do, which is really something that's not offered from the mainstream perspective at all. Most cancer patients are told that diet won't make any difference at all, and it's really just a matter of taking whatever treatment the standard of care has to offer. So we really do a lot with respect to supporting adjunctive care, as well as people who are not wanting to do any more standard of care. So you can see some of this isn't complete yet, but lots of different services that we offer now. So these are all things that grew out over the last 20 years and haven't always really been there as part of the picture. So keeping my overhead low has just been key for me, because it's given me so much flexibility to be able to onboard things when I was ready to onboard those things. So let's see here. We're at 2:17. One of the other things that I would just share about kind of getting going in the when I first started my business was that I know there's a little couple typos on this page, so bear with me if there's any you're seeing anything that doesn't make any sense. Let's see here if my testimonials page is working. One of the things that another entrepreneur said to me when I first started practicing was, he said, sales cure all ills. And it was just always something that I held on to, because I knew that if circumstances were to change, such as this, whole pandemic we've all been through, that if I could become flexible, nimble, and change a priority of what I'm focusing on in marketing and selling, that we would always be okay. And that's pretty much essentially what has always served me. Even though, frankly, I haven't really had to be all that nimble in terms of what I provide, because people are perennially needing the services that we provide in this current environment, in this paradigm. So pretty much, understanding that if you can come up with a product that has value to your customer, that the sales will always be there. And if there's aspects of what is not selling, then you just need to restrict and redirect your focus back to what does sell. So linking that back around to this concept of entrepreneurs, visionaries, game changers, one of my biggest issues is that I have a gazillion ideas and I can never get them all implemented. And the more that I can focus and keep the priorities of what I'm after straight, then the more I'm going to be successful. So in the last 2 years ago, I joined an organization called Entrepreneurs Organization. It's an international organization that has a program for businesses that are below $1 million, and kind of serving in this accelerator program with the goal of trying to get the businesses over $1 million, and then you can be part of the regular EO or Entrepreneurs Organization. I don't really have getting to $1 million as a goal, because I don't really care so much about that. It's really more about the services that I provide and wanting to give people access to good medicine, and medicine that really works without hurting people in the process, really taking that Hippocratic oath of doing no harm very, very seriously. But I wanted to tell people about EO, because EO helped me learn about a model of building called traction, which maybe all of you already know about yet, but I just thought I would share my what's called a vision traction organizer here. So this is the core values for Options Naturopathic Clinic, which the acronym for that is HEART, honesty and integrity in everything, excellence and enthusiasm for what we do, attitude and accountability is everything. That has to do both with my staff and whatnot, but I kind of think of that as, kind of bleeding over into the customers that we serve, because accountability to self is such a critical part of holistic medicine. Responsibility to our job and our purpose, always doing the next right thing. Trust and respect of and to ourselves, each other, those we serve, and Mother Earth. I would love to make our organization more and more and more environmentally conscious as much as we possibly can. You see our purpose here is really about helping people recognize that health and illness has everything to do with their own evolution of consciousness, if you will. So that's a pretty big, tall order there that we have down for our purpose and passion, but that really is what we're stepping into in helping our patients trust and align themselves with. So restoring health with natural medicine and without pharma. We'd love to have what we call a mitochondrial reboot and renewal center. This is kind of part of a bigger vision. And then our marketing strategy of just offering that true terrain medicine using this metabolic approach in cancer, really believing that there isn't anything that we can't help. And I can say that I've seen that over and over again. When folks are committed, they really do make that transition over to becoming well and stabilizing any kind of issue, no matter how critical, how severe it is. So with that, I will take any questions if we have any questions. I'll just share that another one of the things that's happened was that I had a patient that I helped probably about 15 years ago. She came in for her chronic sinus infection. She was one of these folks who was just going back and getting antibiotics over and over and over again. And she came back in the fold kind of recently and then said, you know, I think I could help your team out kind of getting some of the messages across. And why don't we sit down and talk about it? And I said, that would be great. And then she ended up coming in for a patient visit and saw this book sitting on my front staff's desk and said, what's that? And we turned it over and it was a copy of Traction. And she was like, oh, I use that system all the time. That's basically what I do. And so she's kind of stepped into a role of really further helping us focus all of these different priorities into, you know, really being consistent about having weekly meetings and offsite quarterly meetings and an annual meeting to get very clear on what are the services we want to provide and how we do that. So I see a question here. Do you incorporate nutrition or functional medicine practices in your business model? So great question. Absolutely, nutrition is a core part of naturopathic medicine because we help people understand what diet they should be eating. So, you know, nutrition certainly falls under that. We all are nutritionally deficient when we're not eating optimal food or food that hasn't been grown in optimal soil. So absolutely, we educate everyone about nutrition, and it certainly is not going to be the typical nutrition model as you might think about when somebody gets a nutrition degree. It's really more of a foods-based and whole foods-based type of thinking, and then also looking at macronutrients like proteins, carbs, fats, and what specific people need to do there or how to get the specific nutrients for different conditions that they have from specific foods. And then functional medicine practices, I just have to laugh a little bit about that because most people don't know that functional medicine was actually birthed out of some MDs and some NDs hanging out together out in the Pacific Northwest, 20, 30 years ago. So functional medicine is this concept of you're looking at the function of the body and focusing more on physiology, which, naturopathic doctors arose out of eclectic thinkers and holistic minded, what they called 100 years ago, drugless doctors. We've been doing that really all along. There's also a functional medicine school of medical thought that arose up out of Germany. So, functional, we really are the original functional medicine doctors. And it's hard for me to speak to what a functional medicine practice is, because the difference with naturopathic medicine is that we are so truly philosophically, holistically based. It's really that philosophy. And one of the areas that I think I can help people to understand what I mean by that is we really take into consideration the whole person. So rather than saying, okay, we're going to do some herbs for this particular issue, but then keep you on your blood pressure medicine, we're really looking at the field of the person to help them understand how and why someone would have blood pressure issues to begin with, and how that fits into metabolic issues and mental, emotional issues. So it's a bit broader in my thinking, having been, in this field for over 30 years now. It's functional medicine is just kind of like the baby part of what was really came out of naturopathic medicine's influence on some holistically oriented medical doctors who saw that there was an issue and wanted to do things differently. So, not meaning to be derogatory at all to functional medicine, but it it's in its early steps. And I think a lot of times it's hard to take the medical training that was so inculcated into a medical doctor's thinking that, you know, when they start to go in that realm, they're not always able to fully jump into the philosophical capacity and trust what the medicine really has to offer. So yeah, let's see. How did you target an audience who wants to see a ND versus a MD? So if you could say more, Lori, in terms of how I target an audience, I mean, the people who want to see a naturopathic doctor, you know, those are definitely my folks, but we would have always, you know, if I look at all my patients, I have people who, you know, have a medical doctor, who have oncologists that are working with, and then there are people who haven't been to a doctor in 20 years and, you know, hate doctors and would never go into a clinic, who I might even have to say, you know, you might want to think about going to get X, Y, or Z done. So I really can help any swath of all of those populations. Did you use specific marketing techniques or collaborate with other doctors? I would say that when I first started, I was pretty savvy about getting a website right away. And that helped me specifically be able to put my message out there and help people to find me. And then in the beginning, I got a lot of referrals through our National Professional Association. And, you know, now my referrals really come a lot from Google, the national public figure who works a lot in the metabolic cancer field. Her name is Dr. Nasha Winters. I get a lot of referrals from her and referrals from other patients that are, you know, family members. Once we help one person, like, it just kind of bleeds through to the other family members who want to come in and get helped. And in terms of collaborations with other doctors, I certainly am open to doing that. Anybody who understands and gets our model and our philosophy of medicine, we certainly work with a lot of other practitioners. They're not necessarily other doctors other than the one that I have in my practice. Not that I'm not open to doing that, but it's mostly about who those people are that are collaborating, are interested in collaborating, are the more holistic minded thinkers. So I think we're about out of time here. So thanks everybody for joining in.